Why successful people act before it's too late. While everyone else is waiting for the perfect moment, successful people have already made their move, secured their position, and locked in advantages that will never be available again. And by the time most people realize what happened, the opportunity is gone forever. The difference between people who achieve extraordinary success and those who spend their lives wondering what could have been often comes down to a single factor that has nothing to do with intelligence, talent, or even hard work. It's timing, but not in the way most people think. Successful people don't wait for the right time to act. They understand that the right time is always now, before the window closes, before the competition catches on, before the market shifts, and before it becomes too late to capture the opportunity that's sitting right in front of them. Think about every major success story, whether it's in business, investing, technology, or any other field. The people who won big weren't the ones with the best ideas or the most resources. They were the ones who moved first, who acted while others were still deliberating, who committed while others were still considering. Steve Jobs didn't wait until personal computers were perfected before starting Apple. Jeff Bezos didn't wait until e-commerce was proven before launching Amazon. Warren Buffett doesn't wait until stocks hit their absolute bottom before buying. They all understood something fundamental about success that most people never grasp. Hesitation is the enemy of achievement, and waiting for certainty is a guaranteed path to missing out. The psychology behind why most people wait too long is fascinating and tragic at the same time. We're wired to seek safety, to avoid risk, to wait for more information before making decisions. This made sense when our ancestors were deciding whether to explore unknown territory where predators might be lurking. But in today's world, this same instinct causes us to miss opportunities that could transform our lives. We tell ourselves we need to do more research, we need to save a little more money, we need to gain more experience, we need conditions to be just right. Meanwhile, the people who are going to succeed are already in motion, already making mistakes and learning from them, already building momentum while we're still preparing to start. What successful people understand is that perfect conditions never arrive. There will always be uncertainty. There will always be risks. There will always be reasons to wait. The economy might turn down. Technology might change. Competition might emerge. Personal circumstances might not be ideal. If you wait for all the stars to align, you'll be waiting forever, and by the time you finally feel ready, the opportunity will have moved on to someone else who was willing to act despite not feeling completely ready. The magic happens in the gap between when you're ready and when you act anyway. Consider real estate investing as a perfect example. In every market cycle, there's a period where prices are low, properties are available, and conditions are favorable for buyers. During these windows, most people are paralyzed by fear because the economy looks bad, unemployment might be high, or the news is full of doom and gloom. They wait for things to get better, for the market to recover, for confidence to return. By the time they feel comfortable buying, prices have already doubled or tripled, and the opportunity is gone. Meanwhile, successful investors bought when everyone else was scared, when properties were cheap, when sellers were desperate. They didn't have perfect information. They didn't know for certain that the market would recover, but they understood that the best opportunities come disguised as problems that scare away most people. The same pattern repeats in careers. The time to negotiate your salary is before you accept the job, not after you've been there for years. The time to start building your skills in an emerging field is when it's still emerging, not after it's already mainstream and saturated with competitors. The time to build relationships with influential people is before you need their help, not when you're desperate and have nothing to offer them. The time to establish yourself as an expert is before everyone else recognizes the importance of your field, not after it's already crowded with people claiming expertise. Successful people make these moves early, often when it feels premature, because they know that by the time it feels like the right time to everyone else, it's already too late to get in on the ground floor. Starting a business follows the same principle. Most people spend years planning their business, perfecting their business plan, waiting until they have enough savings, waiting until they have more experience, waiting until market conditions are ideal. The business they're planning to start keeps evolving in their mind, but never becomes real. Successful entrepreneurs start before they're ready, often with imperfect products, limited resources, and lots of uncertainty. They figure things out as they go. They iterate based on real market feedback. They build momentum that attracts resources and opportunities. The person who starts a mediocre business today and improves it over time will end up far ahead of the person who spends 5 years planning the perfect business that never launches. Investing is perhaps the clearest illustration of why timing matters and why successful people act before it's too late. The biggest returns come from getting into investments early, before they're obvious to everyone. Whether it's stocks, real estate, cryptocurrency, or any other asset class, the people who make life-changing money are the ones who invested when it was still risky and uncertain. By the time an investment is safe and obvious, most of the gains have already happened. Your neighbor who made a fortune on Bitcoin didn't buy it in 2021 when everyone was talking about it. They bought it years earlier when it seemed crazy and risky. The investors who became wealthy from Amazon stock bought it in the late 1990s when the company was losing money, and most analysts said it would fail, not in 2020 when its success was undeniable. Education and skill development work the same way. The time to learn new skills is before you need them, before they're required for your job, before everyone else is learning them too. When artificial intelligence started becoming important, some people immediately started learning about it, taking courses, experimenting with it, building expertise. Others waited to see if it was just hype, waited to see if it would really matter, waited until they felt they had time. Now those early adopters are the ones getting promoted, getting hired for premium positions, launching successful businesses, while the people who waited are scrambling to catch up in a crowded field where basic AI literacy is already expected rather than valued. Health is another domain where acting before it's too late makes all the difference. Successful people don't wait until they have a health crisis to start taking care of their bodies. They exercise when they're young and it feels unnecessary. They eat well when they could get away with junk food. They get regular checkups when they feel fine. They manage stress before it manifests as disease. The person who starts taking their health seriously at age 30 will have a completely different quality of life at age 60 compared to the person who waited until age 50 to start caring. Some opportunities in life can be recovered if you miss them, but your health has a narrowing window, and damage done through years of neglect can't always be reversed, no matter how much money or effort you apply later. Relationships and networking demonstrate this principle in a different way. Successful people build relationships before they need them. They reach out to people when they have nothing specific to ask for. They offer help and value without expecting immediate returns. They stay in touch with their network consistently rather than only contacting people when they need something. By the time they need a job referral, an introduction, advice, or support, they have a network of people who know them, trust them, and want to help them. The person who waits until they're desperate to start networking finds that building genuine relationships takes time, and you can't create years of trust and goodwill overnight when you suddenly need it. The compound effect is why acting early matters so much. Small actions taken early compound over time into massive results. Money invested early has more time to grow through compound interest. Skills developed early have more time to be practiced and refined. Relationships built early have more time to deepen. Businesses started early have more time to find product-market fit and build momentum. The person who starts saving and investing at age 25, even with small amounts, will end up far wealthier than the person who waits until age 45 to start saving larger amounts, purely because of the extra years of compounding. The person who starts building their personal brand at age 28 will have a completely different trajectory than the person who waits until age 48 to start, even if the 48-year-old has more expertise, because they're missing 20 years of compounding visibility and credibility. Risk tolerance changes over time in ways that make early action even more important. When you're young, you can afford to take risks because you have time to recover if things don't work out. You can start a business that fails and still have decades to build wealth through other means. You can invest aggressively and weather market downturns. You can change careers and start over in a new field. As you get older, your responsibilities increase, your financial obligations grow, your timeline shortens, and your ability to take the risks that lead to extraordinary outcomes diminishes. The irony is that people often wait until they feel more secure and capable before taking big swings, but by the time they feel ready, their circumstances make those big swings much harder to take. Technology adoption curves show this pattern repeatedly. Every new technology or platform goes through phases. The innovators who adopt it first when it's rough and uncertain, the early adopters who get in while it's still growing, the early majority who adopt once it's proven, the late majority who adopt because they have to, and the laggards who resist until it's unavoidable. The wealth and opportunities created by new technologies go overwhelmingly to the innovators and early adopters. The people who got on YouTube in 2006, Instagram in 2011, or TikTok in 2018, and started creating content, built audiences and opportunities that are much harder to replicate now that these platforms are saturated. The people who learned to code in the 1980s, who learned web development in the 1990s, who learned mobile development in the 2000s, positioned themselves for careers that shaped industries. Waiting to see if a technology matters means you miss the window where adoption of that technology creates disproportionate value. Geographic arbitrage is another area where timing matters enormously. Cities and regions go through cycles of growth, and the people who move to growing cities early, before they become expensive and crowded, reap enormous benefits. The people who moved to Austin or Nashville or Dubai or Lisbon before they became hot saw their quality of life improve while their cost of living stayed reasonable. They built networks before competition intensified. They bought property before prices exploded. The people who move to these cities now after they're already established as desirable destinations pay premium prices and face intense competition for opportunities. Career moves often have optimal timing windows that successful people recognize and act on. Switching industries is easiest when you're younger and don't have golden handcuffs tying you to your current path. Moving to a high-growth company is most valuable early in that company's trajectory, not after they're already dominant and growth has slowed. Transitioning into leadership roles becomes harder if you wait too long in individual contributor roles. Taking an international assignment is easier before you have school-age children and a spouse's career to coordinate around. Every career decision has a window when it's relatively easy and a time when it becomes much harder, and successful people make these moves during the easy windows rather than waiting until circumstances force difficult transitions. The information advantage that used to exist is shrinking rapidly. In the past, successful people might have acted on information that wasn't widely known yet, giving them an edge in markets, investments, or business opportunities. Today, information spreads almost instantly, which means the advantage goes even more strongly to people who act quickly on information rather than those who just know it. Everyone can research what the best investments are, what the growing industries are, what skills are becoming valuable. The differentiator is who acts on that information immediately versus who bookmarks it to consider later. Regulatory and policy changes create windows of opportunity that close once everyone adapts. Tax strategies that work today might not work tomorrow once laws change. Immigration policies that allow certain pathways might be restricted in the future. Industry regulations that permit certain business models might tighten. Successful people take advantage of favorable conditions while they exist, rather than assuming those conditions will persist indefinitely. They move jurisdictions while it's still easy. They structure their businesses to take advantage of current rules. They act on policies that benefit them before those policies change. The psychology of regret reveals something important about timing. Research shows that people regret inactions more than actions over the long term. In the short term, you might regret trying something and failing, but in the long term, you regret the things you didn't try, the opportunities you didn't pursue, the chances you didn't take. Successful people understand this and choose to risk the short-term regret of failure over the long-term regret of never trying. They'd rather look back and say they gave it their best shot than wonder what might have been if they'd only acted. Momentum is a force that successful people harness by acting early. Success builds on success, and getting early wins creates momentum that makes subsequent wins easier. The first dollar is harder to make than the millionth dollar. The first customer is harder to acquire than the 1,000th customer. The first follower is harder to gain than the 10,000th follower. By acting early and starting to build momentum, successful people position themselves on an upward trajectory where success becomes increasingly easier and compounds on itself. The person who waits to start gives up all those early compounding cycles and has to work much harder to achieve the same outcomes. Market inefficiencies don't last forever. Whenever there's a gap between what something is worth and what it's priced at, that gap attracts people who exploit it, and through their actions, the gap closes. Real estate in undervalued neighborhoods gets discovered and prices correct upward. Undervalued stocks get bought and prices rise. Lucrative career paths get publicized and competition increases. Business opportunities in underserved markets get filled. The people who benefit from inefficiencies are those who act while the inefficiency exists, not those who wait for the inefficiency to be obvious to everyone, because by then it's already gone. Personal development works on similar timelines. The habits you build early become automatic and shape your entire life. The discipline you develop young becomes easier to maintain as you age. The character you build through early challenges prepares you for bigger challenges later. The person who develops strong habits, discipline, and character in their 20s has a foundation that supports everything they do for the rest of their life. The person who waits to work on these fundamentals until their 30s or 40s can still improve, but they're fighting against decades of ingrained patterns, and they've already missed years of compounding benefits. The scarcity mindset versus abundance mindset plays into timing in interesting ways. People with scarcity mindset wait to act because they're afraid of losing what little they have. They wait for guaranteed outcomes. They avoid risks. They hesitate because they can't afford to fail. Ironically, this mindset keeps them in scarcity because the opportunities that could move them toward abundance require acting without guarantees. People with abundance mindset understand that opportunities are abundant but time-limited, so they act quickly to capture value, knowing that even if this particular opportunity doesn't work out, their bias toward action will eventually lead them to opportunities that do work out. Social proof is both a help and a hindrance when it comes to timing. Most people wait until something has social proof before they're comfortable acting, but by the time there's overwhelming social proof, the early advantages are gone. When everyone agrees that something is a good idea, it's too late to get the outsized returns that early movers captured. Successful people are comfortable acting with less social proof, making decisions based on their own analysis and judgment rather than waiting for consensus, which means they're positioned to benefit from trends before they're obvious to everyone. The role of preparation is often misunderstood when it comes to timing. Successful people do prepare, but they prepare while acting, not instead of acting. They start the business while they're still learning how to run it. They make the investment while they're still studying the market. They take the job while they're still developing the skills. Preparation that happens in isolation, without real-world application, is far less valuable than preparation that happens through actual doing. The person who spends a year preparing to start a business without actually starting it learns less than the person who starts immediately and prepares through 6 months of real experience. Legacy and long-term impact require early action simply because they need time to develop. If you want to build something meaningful that outlasts you, you need to start now, not later. The books that become classics are written by authors who started writing early. The companies that change industries are built by founders who started before they felt ready. The philanthropic foundations that make lasting impact are created by people who started giving and building wealth early in their careers. The mentorship relationships that shape future generations are formed by people who invest in others long before they see returns. Impact takes time to compound, and you can't create 40 years of impact if you only start acting 20 years before you die. Financial independence is perhaps the clearest example of why acting before it's too late matters so much. The difference between retiring at 45, 55, or 65 comes down almost entirely to when you started saving and investing, not how much you earned. Two people with identical incomes and identical ultimate savings rates will have vastly different outcomes based solely on when they started. Starting at 25 versus 35 versus 45 creates differences measured in decades of freedom and millions of dollars, purely through the timing of when you began taking action. The concept of optionality is crucial here. Acting early creates options that you don't have if you wait. The person who starts building multiple income streams early has options when their main income source is threatened. The person who builds a diverse skill set early has options when their industry changes. The person who maintains their health early has options in how they spend their later years. The person who builds wealth early has options in how they spend their time. Waiting to act means you're limiting your future options, often in ways you don't realize until those options would have been valuable but are no longer available. What does all this mean for you, right now, today? It means that whatever you've been thinking about doing, whatever opportunity you've been considering, whatever change you've been contemplating, the time to act is now. Not next month when you've done more research. Not next year when you've saved more money. Not when conditions are perfect or when you feel completely ready. Now, while the opportunity still exists, while you still have time for your actions to compound, while you can still capture the advantages that early movers get, look at your life right now and identify the areas where you've been hesitating. Maybe it's starting that business you've been planning. Maybe it's investing in that asset class you've been researching. Maybe it's learning that skill you know will be valuable. Maybe it's having that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it's making that career change you've been considering. Maybe it's starting that health regimen you know you need. Whatever it is, ask yourself honestly, what am I waiting for? And then ask, will waiting make this easier or harder? Will the opportunity be better or worse if I wait? Will I have more time or less time to benefit from taking action? Successful people act before it's too late because they understand that too late comes faster than most people expect, and once it arrives, no amount of regret or hindsight will bring the opportunity back. They understand that imperfect action now beats perfect action later, because perfect action later usually becomes impossible action eventually. They understand that the gap between where they are and where they want to be can only be closed by starting to move, not by planning to move someday. The question isn't whether you'll face uncertainty and risk by acting now. You will. The question is whether you'll face even more uncertainty and risk by waiting, whether you'll face the certainty of missed opportunity, whether you'll face the regret of watching others succeed at things you could have done if only you'd started when you first had the chance. Successful people choose the uncertainty of action over the certainty of regret. And that choice, repeated consistently throughout their lives, is what separates them from everyone else who's still waiting for the perfect moment that will never come.